panel discussion for today will be headed by Dr. Girija Sajjan ma'am, and our distinguished panelists for today are Dr. N. Venkatesh Babu sir, Dr. N. Srinivasan sir, Dr. M. S. Nivedita ma'am, Dr. N. Velmurugan sir, Dr. Kavita ma'am, Dr. Raj Shekhar sir, and our HOD Dr. S. Mahalakshmi ma'am. Dr. Girija Sajjan ma'am is the professor and head of Vishnu Dental College, Bhimavaram, Andhra Pradesh. She's completed her graduation from KD Belgaum and post-graduation from Bapuji Dental College, Davangere. She has 27 years of clinical experience in the field of dentistry and is recognized as a PhD guide of NTR University, Vijayawada. She is a member and chairman of the board of PG Studies of NTR University and is the course director of the Magnification Enhanced Dentistry in Vishnu Dental College. To her credit, she was the best outgoing student from KD Belgaum and awarded the best IDA president in 1997. She has 55 publications in national and international journals, and she has authored a chapter in the textbook on the topic Different Obturation Technique for Internal Resorption Cavities by Lambert Academic Publication. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Hello. Happy afternoon, everyone. Every year, researchers publish more than 3 million articles in various scientific journals, adding to the height of the existing mountain of evidence. Thank God there is something called a systematic review and meta-analysis, which will take us to the top of the mountain, which will give us a thorough and at the same time abridged view of evidence in a specialty. So this is a very fantastic, the theme that SRM has selected, and we all are really happy to be, have got enlightened with all these 4 great speakers. So systematic review, definitely it gives us the quality, but then I am interested in the number. How much, if the effect is more, how much more it is. So that is given by the meta-analysis. Let me put it in a simple way. All of you, you must be planning for all the post-grad students must be planning for a very marvelous clinic with a high-notch technology. But if I want to know, is it worth to invest so much for particular equipment or a system? If I know the benefit is more for me as well as my patients, then I can think of. If the benefit ranges from 0.2 to 7%, then I may think lower limit is too low for me. So this meta-analysis is going to give us the real idea as to take a decision on whatever, for the policymakers and as well for us to adopt a system or any technique, something like that. So we have heard by these people, and this 2 days brainstorming session has given us a lot of ideas. And now simply I just want to put it that, the meta-analysis is so important. It's kind of icing on the cake. So that's a wonderful deliberation by today by Dr. Srinivasan and Dr. Venkatesh Babu. So now let me walk you all through the panel of discussion, that is a Q&A session. So let us start with the questions. So first question, I would like to put it to Dr. Srinivasan. How to decide when to use MH or IV analysis for meta-analysis?
MH and IV. First of all, MH means a Mantel-Haenszel method, which is used for a fixed effect model, and IV is a inverse variance method. I think the participant has asked which model to be used for odds ratio, I believe, a proportion-based study. Generally, inverse variance method is preferred. However, if you have very low sample size, inverse variance method may not be accurate. In that case, you can use Mantel-Haenszel method under only fixed effect model. Otherwise, it is advisable to go with the inverse variance method.
Yeah, thank you. You have discussed about the fixed and random effect model very effectively. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
And the next question is going to be to Dr. Venkatesh Babu. The grade quality assessment, is it subjective? And does it vary depending on the assessor?
Exactly, ma'am. It's subjective.
It is subjective.
Subjective. I said there is an overlap between these few criteria. It's subjective only.
So then how to decide?
As a content expert, you have to decide. For example, heterogeneity, the I-square will be overlap in 2 criteria.
Yeah,
that say whether it comes in this or that. So it depends on your content knowledge.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Dr. Kavita, can you take some give some.
Yes, ma'am. Srini,
Yes, ma'am.
how to do a power calculation if there is a when do meta-analysis?
And power calculation in meta-analysis is something similar to the power calculation of a primary study, say clinical trial, ma'am. Under a fixed effect model, we can say the power calculation is only influenced by the number of samples included in the all over the studies. Whereas in a random effect model, the power is affected by so many factors. It's not only about the number of samples included in the meta-analysis, it is also about the variability. I mean the heterogeneity present between the studies. And the number of studies also counts under the random effect model. For example, in a fixed effect model, 3 studies with 500 samples is satisfying the power means. In a random effect model, it is not the case. Even sample size is 700, 3 studies may not be sufficient under random effect model. So number of studies also to be considered in a random effect model. And moreover, as Dr. Venkatesh Babu said, when to stop a meta-analysis, we can do a trial sequential analysis and we can find the criteria, how much sample size is needed to stop the study with a alpha spending boundaries. So we can use that model also, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am. Girija, ma'am.
Thank you. Dr. Srinivasan, there are 2 more questions associated with this trial sequential analysis. I have asked, please elaborate on that.
I think Dr. Venkatesh Babu can elaborate about the trial sequential analysis.
Ma'am, can I go?
Yeah, please.
Trial sequential analysis is generally, it will be coupled with your meta-analysis. The main objective of trial sequential analysis is it will say you whether the results of meta-analysis is conclusive or inconclusive based on your number of samples. For example, you are doing a meta-analysis with clinical trials. So as Dr. Srini said, you will be key in what is the number of samples and what is the success for both the groups. Once you are done, A and B, either A will be better or B will be better or no difference. So this 3 we will be getting it from one meta-analysis. For example, in one meta-analysis you are getting A is better. The trial sequential analysis will say drug A is better is conclusive based on the number of samples. So again, for trial sequential analysis, you have to keep all the number of samples and your success and failure rates. So it will calculate on your number of samples, saying that for this particular study, to test whether A and B is better, your number of sample is more. So you no need that any future clinical trials or already you are crossed your number of samples. In case few studies, what will say is meta-analysis will say A is better, but trial sequential analysis will say the number of samples is less. So it means you have to take that with a pinch of salt, saying that A is better in meta-analysis, but the result is not conclusive. So what you have to do is automatically you have to downgrade your grade analysis under your imprecision category. So that is your think about your trial sequential analysis.
That's nice. Thank you. Now the next question is to Dr. Nivedita, ma'am. What is the role of Bayesian analysis in meta-analysis?
That is, yesterday it was already discussed.
We discussed this yesterday itself, ma'am.
Yeah. But then maybe they have not understood.
Actually, some questions are from yesterday because we had short of time. We had not taken up some questions, so maybe
this was discussed, ma'am.
From yesterday only.
This question was discussed by me, ma'am.
Probably this question was discussed already.
Discussed. I answered this question.
Okay, so we can move on to the next.
I can explain again.
We can move to the next.
Bayesian modeling. There are 2 types of modeling: frequent test approach and a Bayesian approach. The frequent test approach, as I mentioned earlier, it always tests a null hypothesis. We formulate a hypothesis and we test the hypothesis by the included studies. We either accept the hypothesis or reject the hypothesis. Whereas a Bayesian model is something different. It is more about our belief. Say, for example, we are tossing a coin for 10 times. And I am getting 6 times head and remaining 4 times tail. And if I'm concluding the results that the probability of getting hits is 60%, I'm concluding means I know very well that the same thing is not going to happen for the next 10 times. It is not going to be 6 times hit, even if I'm going to repeat the experiments for 10 times. And I'm sure about it. I believe that the coin is fair enough, and we may get two hits or 3 hits or 5 hits or 7 hits. Depends like that. So we cannot. So based upon the assumption, I have to set the assumption, not a null hypothesis, that the effect will be in this range. The drug A will have this much amount of effect compared to drug B. I will be having a belief in my mind, and I will be including the results, and I'll verify whether the results are within the assumption margin or a belief margin. So this is a Bayesian approach. Ideally speaking, the Bayesian approach is a better model, but people are not trained in Bayesian model. There are very few people who are trained in Bayesian statistics. I follow only frequentist approach. So in later, after 5 years or 10 years, we will be using only Bayesian approach for regular statistical analysis. Not only for meta-analysis, we may be using the Bayesian approach for regular statistical analysis. So I have mentioned this yesterday itself.
Yeah, so this is a better analysis that we can follow in the future.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Dr. Rajshekharan, can you put some questions?
Unmute yourself, Rajshekhar, please unmute yourself.
Dr. Babu, please could you help us understand the difference between scoping review and the systematic review?
Scoping review is a little bit broad terminology. As I told you, the systematic review has to be very focused. The scoping review can be a little bit broad. It's a little bit between your narrative review and systematic review. Scoping review, you will be following research strategy and all those things. But your research question can be a little bit broad.
Additional question in that, can scoping review be chosen instead of a narrative review? Yes. When we have a topic of wider interest where strict eligibility criteria is not possible?
Exactly, it can be done. That also can be done.
Okay.
Okay. There is a question by the organizer herself. Can I ask Dr. Mahalakshmi to put her question?
Okay. This regarding the publication bias. Generally, we say no, this because you get a lot of articles which have positive results. But unfortunately, studies with non-significant, like they're not accepted so easily. They get rejected. So how do we, how do we counter this publication bias?
Ma'am, as I explained in my slides, the publication bias of the small study effects not getting published and non-significant results, or with a negative significant, you mean to say the significant on the control side is not getting published because of the two reasons. One is the researcher himself or herself may not be interested in writing the manuscript.
No, these are all publications sent and they get rejected because there is
yes,
no,
yes.
result in that.
So deal with this, the first and best approach is we have to do an extensive literature search to find out. There is a method called a file drawer analysis. All these negative studies will be in your file and drawer. We have to explore it and we have to find out. And there is a statistical method called fail and safe method, but it is no longer accepted now because of its low power. The best model suggested is trim and fill model. There is one more model called PISO and P-curve. Based upon these statistical models, we can deal with publication bias to a certain extent. However, we cannot eliminate the publication bias because each and every statistical model works with its own limitations. So publication bias has to be dealt only in two ways. Only the journal, the editorial board has to change their attitude of accepting it. Second thing is we have to do extensive literature search. These two are the important ways to avoid the publication bias. All the statistical model, some extent it can deal with it now.
Any inputs from Dr. Venkatesh Babu regarding this?
I think you're asking saying that because of so and so reason, the manuscript is getting rejected. correct? So how to avoid those issues? Not purely about the statistical point or statistical publication, right, ma'am? Is my understanding is correct?
No, publication bias is one aspect that we have to take into consideration. But generally speaking, that is the one is that authors themselves do not publish it. That apart, even if we send articles which do not have any significance, or with the control having better significance, sometimes they get rejected even in spite of everything else being they say this does not have any clinical significance.
Exactly.
The reason given for the rejection is that there is no clinical significance, or there's nothing new in the article. So these are the points that are given for rejection. So that means that you will not get articles that are published like that. So your publication bias is definitely going to be there when we do analysis. So how do you take that into consideration?
The only way to tease out this issue is, ma'am, in case if they are rejecting whatever reasons you are saying, the introduction section has to be very clear in that part. So why are you doing this study? So you have to tease your rationale in depth. Plus your discussion section also, you have to bring it in such a way that even though there is no difference between these two drugs, this plays a key role or whatever, something like that, you have to tease it out. It's in hand of the authors how you project your result. Even though it might be a negative result, it will be totally controversial result, I can understand. But you have to justify why you got those results. So that is how you have to tease it out.
Can I come in for a minute? I just have a different opinion regarding this. I thought, if I am right, ma'am wants to know what will happen to that data. So if we can, there is nobody preventing us from putting a negative result into the database, no? So that enables a systematic reviewer to take in that data also into account. So this could solve in the problem a little bit, because there is no rejection for you to put your results in the trial registry. Actually, we most of us don't do it. We need to probably put in our results into the trial registry or the database what you're doing. So if you're going to do that, probably the systematic reviewer will definitely pick in this data, and hence that data will also go into the analysis, and maybe that will also give us the true effect. Is it okay, Babu? Or
yes, that is one of the things. So as you said, if somebody put their results in the database, so that will be, even though if it's not published, some systematic review authors can be capturing that as a gray literature and bringing that into their analysis.
Yeah.
Yesterday, there was one question about the gray literature, asking how to cite the gray literature. So it will be like unpublished, and you have to give the cite of gray literature where the search has been done, or how do you cite the gray literature when it is being included?
Wherever you're getting, you can cite it. For example, it can be an internet source. So you just give that link, that's all.
Okay. So you have to mention it as an unpublished data, and we have to put the give the link, or whichever source we have got it.
And if you see the Prisma flowchart, there itself you can mention the published from databases, so many numbers, gray literature, so many numbers.
Okay.
This section, for example, you are getting 5 papers, give the link of the 5 papers, that's all. Of course, you will be getting a link for that. Anyway, you are picking only from the internet source. So you can give a link as a reference section, not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, also I think, though if everything else is fine, publication is also not a bad idea, because ultimately publication also matters. So if everything is fine, I think the editors should now have that idea that these also can be published, because many of my colleagues also, they say if there is a negative result or no statistical significance, it will not get published, madam, they say. So that trend should go. And they also should be, if everything is fine, as you said, I think it should be, editors have to take a call on that. Yeah, thank you for everybody's contribution to this. And there is a question to Dr. Venkatesh Babu. How long does it take for a beginner to write an SR, and how long does it take you to write an SR?
Good comparison. Good.
Again, the subjective answer.
Yeah. Language of meta-analysis.
I think Venkatesh Babu will now do a systematic review on this also.
The time.
So for me, it will take at least 4 to 6 months time. But knowing you, everybody, they are very active and very fast. So you can finish within a 3 months time.
For you, if it takes 4 to 6 months, for us, it's going to be more than 1 year. You have all the resource or persons to help you. You have a big team. Software management, all that we don't have. We have to do everything manually, and the team is also less. So it will take more time.
Yeah, ma'am, I am from Tamil Nadu. I am from your next college.
Yeah, now we are associated with, you have good contacts.
Now that Nivedita also has told that, then probably we will take, we are all beginners, so we will take 2 years.
I know.
So we can expect our first SRA to be released in 2023.
As you said, your team is very important. So while starting, as we discussed yesterday, library dissertation, and start 3 topic, you can put 3 person. So one person will be doing one major work. So another person will be doing a little bit of less work in another systematic review. So that parallelly you can run all those 3 or 4 systematic reviews. Or else you can pick your second year student as well. So one person from your first year will be a primary person. So second year person automatically he will have some knowledge about the content so that he can be a second assessor. So meantime, you can put one more person, he can help you in introduction section. So in most of my systematic review, I won't deal anything about statistical part at all. So whatever the statistical person gives me the results, I will be including. So I don't waste my time in statistical analysis. So that's why while giving my lecture also, statistical component won't be there. So because I'm not that trained in statistics. So whatever they give, so that time they will be doing it up. So at that time I will be using it up in some other systematic review. Same way, once I'm done with one systematic review introduction section, I will be passing it to some other my co-investigator. So he will be doing all those checking and correcting and all those things. So meantime, I'll be working on some other systematic review. So rather than focusing one review, just pick it up 3-4 topic. You just divide what is the individual role. So according to that, you can rotate it.
Thank you. But Dr. Venkatesh Babu, do you recommend any training for these people, the PGs, to do such things? Any special training is also required?
We have a lot of hands-on courses with the Cochrane conduct, even in Chennai, in Vellore, I think they are conducting.
Vellore it is there, ma'am.
Ma'am, the easiest thing is to do it in Coursera. Most of us did it in Coursera. That's a 8-week training program. It's quite simple. You can download the recording. You can do it. So that's very good for a beginner if you just don't want to move out and you cannot spend some time, especially for senior people who cannot go for a week or 10 days for a training course. That's very good. Coursera course, especially with John Hopkins, was very good. And most of it is free. Only when you want the certificate, you may have to pay.
You have to pay. Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah, thank you.
And actually in Savida Dental College, we have a tie-up with the Vellore Institute where they come and every year for when the first year PGs join, the PhD students, and they combine the PhD students and the PGs, and we have 2 to 3 days of workshop from Cochrane. From Vellore, they come and conduct. So we have a tie-up with the Vellore Institute. So they come and do it in college. So every year it happens because every first year is a new batch. So that is also done.
Vita College into everything, madam.
No, just now Nivedita was pulling Venkatesh Babu's leg, saying that he has got contacts. Now you know Nivedita has got a lot of contacts. We are.
Can directly mail to the person in that particular field. So of course they will help you. One more secret is so far I never attended any workshop. Just everything is here and say reading, that's all. So the thing is, doubt you have directly, you just mail to that concerned person. For example, if it's a publication bias, I told you one paper, right? Egger and Stern. So directly I wrote a mail that I am a beginner, so I don't know anything in publication bias. Can you help me out with few examples and everything? For sure, they will help you out. It's not an issue at all. Only thing is, we have to remove shyness from our side. Maximum, he will be saying, no, what stupid question you are asking, that's all. Or else he won't reply. We have to be ready for that, that's all.
Yeah. So there is one more question to Venkatesh Babu. How are some authors able to do meta-analysis with high heterogeneity, whereas others are not? How do we interpret the reviews that have more than 90% heterogeneity, but still went ahead with meta-analysis to give a conclusion? Are there any other factors that influence doing?
No, you can do a meta-analysis with heterogeneity, but you have to say what is the reason for all those heterogeneity and everything. That's all. So according to that, you have to downgrade your grade analysis. As I told you, the one of the highly heterogeneity will be it's high risk. So 75 to 90%, it will be considered as your high risk heterogeneity. So that you have to be a little careful and you have to discuss that in your discussion.
I have one question regarding the grade analysis, Venkatesh Babu. Now for Srini also, can we do the grade pro without doing meta-analysis? Just we do only the I-square and find out the heterogeneity, and that will, with that, actually we can fill all the box of grade pro, like because we know the number of studies, we know the risk of bias, already we have done the quality assessment, and then only for maybe imprecision and the heterogeneity we need to do the meta-analysis. So, but sometimes when it is very heterogeneous, when we are not doing a meta-analysis, can grade pro be done?
Can be done, because I have seen papers, it has been done, even in JOE, IEJ also it has been published. Without meta-analysis, the grade has been done, but not actually clear how is that, but it's the way for publishing. You can do that.
Okay, so we just calculate the I-square value for the heterogeneous and put whatever is for the heterogeneity, and for the imprecision we should know the confidence interval to enter the value.
Yeah, for if you're not performing meta-analysis, you won't be getting the I-square and CA values.
So then how do you fill that grade pro box?
You have to do it subjectively.
Subjectively, okay. Okay.
Dr. Kavita, do you have some questions?
Srini, any statistical software to be considered especially for this meta-analysis?
Ma'am, for the beginners, RevMan is a better one, ma'am. It's easy to use, but there are some limitations in the RevMan, like we cannot perform certain analysis like meta-regression analysis and determinant fill, all those things we cannot perform in that, ma'am. The best software is Stata, but it is a paid software. Another best software is R language software, software based upon the R language, which is free, but we have some learning curves to use it. There is a software called EZR, which is a point-click software. We can perform meta-analysis based upon the R. It is very useful for everyone. We can download it freely from the website, EZR, and it is again a point-click software based upon the R program. I suggest EZR will be a great software for the beginners, and RevMan too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, over to you, ma'am. Vijay, ma'am.
Dr. Shekaran, do you have any questions?
I think.
We didn't hear the question, ma'am.
No. I'm asking Shekaran to.
Rashek.
I think we have almost done with all the questions. There any other question?
Okay.
Girija madam can ask. I think we'll wind up.
There's a question here for my postgraduate student. How to read an evidence gap map? I think yesterday we did a discussion on this.
No.
Evidence gap maps. You discussed about the patients, they drop out, and then how do we
the intention to treat analysis.
That is different. Yeah. This question is about evidence gap map. How to read the evidence gap.
Yeah. No idea.
I mean, evidence gap means you're asking any software to capture that, or what do you mean by evidence gap?
The question is how to read an evidence gap map.
They mean
have not heard
today in existing literature. But basically, you have to do a detailed literature search. So
extensive.
So then only you will come to know what is missing in this literature. So according to that, you can address your systematic review or clinical whatever.
I think there was a question on umbrella review.
Yeah, umbrella review also.
For yesterday's questions, some are there.
It was today's question.
We have one for 2 for Dr. Velmurugan and 3 for Dr. Nivedita.
Yeah.
Dr. Vale, sir, can you please explain how to apply Newcastle Ottawa scale for quality checking? This is done?
It's just like it's just another tool, and I think it's for non-randomized trials.
Observational studies.
No.
For observational studies.
Cohort maybe.
Cohort study.
More for that, not for randomized. So it's just like any other tool. You'll also have to apply that, and then there is some scoring for that. That's it.
There was one question, ma'am. I started with my first umbrella review, got Prospero registration also, done database search, and made included SR studies data table now. Now, next, how to proceed? That is a question. So, umbrella review, Venkatesh Babu has to answer. The question is passed.
Apologies, next week we plan to have an umbrella review.
I get no excuse for that.
So because of some other reasons which we can't pick up by next week, so probably it will be running in September.
We had planned for one webinar for umbrella review. In between this came and he accepted for this ma'am, Mahalakshmi ma'am, and he did accept for me. So, it's pending now.
Thank you, Venkatesh, for that.
Reason is now I can see
partial
University of Sharjah, but I can't say no to SRM Ramavaram, right, ma'am?
Yeah, right now his wife is doing PG here. So he
went. Now I understand. So full bias. This is bias.
This is presentation bias.
Intentional bias.
Yes, intentional.
The best answer.
Yes, because we cannot explain now. Okay, I can just tell what to follow.
Yeah. They have finalized the number of included systematic reviews in that. So now the most important in umbrella review is, as we all know, umbrella review is a review of systematic reviews. So again, they have to see for each item what is the score for that particular review, and again they have to score in that software. So automatically at the last end you will have a key, something called calculate. You fill all those 16 points and give calculate. Automatically it will reflect what is your evidence which you are getting with that. So that is the next question, next step. Once you get that, based on that you have to write your results and your discussion. That is the last step in your.
So the reporting guideline will be same Prisma or like it is like a systematic review, no? So should we follow the reporting guideline as Prisma or what should we follow?
Itself we can follow, but few items you won't fit. For example, regarding your meta-analysis and all those things won't be there.
But can we combine the meta-analysis from the systematic review or the meta-analysis and do this one? Velmurugan, you had this one, no?
No, ma'am. In umbrella review itself, we have few items which will capture the details of meta-analysis. For example, how method it has been performed, what is the I-square, heterogeneity, all those things it will be captured under your Amstel itself.
Okay.
This is both systematic review and your meta-analysis.
Venkatesh, just a clarification. Supposing we take a particular research topic wherein we get various study designs, in vitro, and then some clinical aspects also, clinical studies also in that. Are we allowed to combine both, or we have to give a separate analysis for the laboratory studies within the SR and separate for the clinical studies?
Ideally speaking, it's better to focus any day randomized clinical trial and followed by clinical trial. But certain situation, as you said, because of the depends on the topic, you have to narrow down with your case reports and even your laboratory-based studies. So at that time, you have to give your discussion based on your individual study design. Meta-analysis also, it has to be conducted separately for your observational and separately for others. Or else your primary analysis, you can combine everything.
Okay.
Do a subgroup saying that you're separately for clinical trial and separating for observational studies.
Okay.
Same way, you can include your case report as well. But again, discussion, you have to be very clear what is the reason why you have combined all the study design. So that will be your selling point.
There is a question to Dr. Velumurugan. Articles in high-end journals mostly use reference management software, EndNote. Being a paid software, is it necessary to use it? Does it matter for acceptance of the article in such high-end journals?
No, I don't think that's needed. You can do it. Bob, you can add on it.
Exactly.
Zero can be
of any softwares. A software will use out your workflow. That's all. Not mandatory for any journal. They're saying that you need Dustman or your EndNote, Mendeley or whatever. Still today, I'm doing my manual. No, it's allowed. It's not an issue at all.
It will depend upon the standard of the, on the content of the.
Not content. It depends on the author. If he's well trained in software, he can use software for reference. If he's not trained in software, he can go for manual method.
Manual.
Should be done.
Yeah. Yes. It won't come to the reviewer purview at all, whether you did your software or whatever.
And one more question is like this. How do we make the translation of other language articles authentic if article other than English are selected? Is there any standard software to translation?
Regarding software, I'm not exactly sure about that. But in general, you can do it in Google Translation. But the important is you have to do twice, forward and backward. For example, you are getting a Chinese article. You have to translate that Chinese article into English. Okay. Again, you have to translate that English version into Chinese, so that everything is come back to the original version. So you have to compare the two versions of Chinese, saying that everything is clear. So then you can interpret using your English version.
Why is it
so? The Chinese authors reply and will they give any English version?
Of course, even though if you are getting that English version, it's your responsibility to check whether the Chinese and English version is same. They won't do all those things, but still to be in safer side, if you want, you can translate in Google Translation or like a regular translator, then you can go ahead with
that. Girija, can we wind up?
Yeah. I think most of the questions are covered, and it was an exhaustive program also altogether. So I really thank Dr. Mahalakshmi and Dr. Rajkumar and whole SRM team to giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you each and every one of you for the wonderful 2 days deliberations, the speakers, the moderators,
thank you, ma'am,
panelists, everyone. You have made this program a wonderful success. I've been getting feedback from yesterday that it was so nice, including the student sessions. There were so many judges, like 18 sessions we had, and each session 2 judges. Everyone had come prepared with their, we had sent the articles ahead and they had come prepared, and the entire session, they themselves said that it was like a learning experience. We felt like students, and in fact, all the credit goes to every one of you who have been part of this program. Thank you all so very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. It was very well conducted, very well organized.
Thank you.
Very nice, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, panelists, for the interactive and informative session. I would like to quote the saying that end is not the end. With this, we come to the end of our scientific session, and in fact, end is an effort that never dies. The world's greatest achievers have been those who have always stayed focused on their goals and have been consistent in their efforts. So please stay focused and always keep trying. You will be able to publish your systematic review and meta-analysis someday. We would now like to present the certificate to Dr. Girija ma'am. Ma'am, please.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. You did a wonderful job. 1 hour of panel discussion is like very phenomenal. 2 days we had one hour of panel discussion. It's very nice. Thank you.
I felt tired at all, Dr. Mahalakshmi. It was, kind of going on. Very nice.
And instead of question and answer session, this panel discussion, this one was very nice, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes,
More
yes,
interactive.
and really thank to both all the 4 speakers who came on both the days.
Yeah.
Very unheard of. So it was really very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. That's what.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks is just a small word, but we definitely appreciate everything that you all did for us.
Till we meet you again with another intellectual session. This is Dr. Kritika Selvakumar from Team Concenter SRM signing off. Thank you one and all.